My name is Carolyn Weems, the Chair of the Policy Review Committee. I now call this meeting to order. It is October 29th, 3:31. And our attendees are Ms. Felton and Mr. Bowenstiel from the school board, and we've got several staff members. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Before we adopt the agenda, I would just like to make some notations. We did pull out from our original agenda 510 and put that on old business B by itself because it didn't go with the others. Also, if it's okay with my colleagues, I would like to, in new business, move D, new business D, up to B, and then move everything down. We've got we've got a lot of information, and so these two are a little bit lighter, and I think that we can for sure, go through A and D, and then head toward trying to complete B and C. So we would have A, policy 323, D, policy 759, and then C, policy 340, and D, policy 554. Is that okay with my colleagues? Did you get that, Miss Anna? Okay. Okay. All right, and I think that's it. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Felton, seconded by Mr. Bowenstiel. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And we have an agenda for the day. All right, do I have a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from our September 24th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Felton and seconded by Mr. Bowenstiel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, our meeting minutes from September 24th are now adopted. The old business, A, policy 412. And, folks, that was the assignment, reassignment, and transfer. We were really discussing the transfer part of this policy. But if my colleagues remember that we kind of discussed it, and in fact, we talked about the regulations. It's in our packet, and we actually discussed it last time about if a teacher wants to transfer, that he or she may go to her principal or even to HR, and there's extenuating circumstances. So we kind of already discussed that, so I don't think that there really needs to, there was never really any follow-through or discussion. And so I think that that's been taken care of. I have already talked to the school board member who brought that forward. But if there's any questions on that, does anybody need clarification? HR is here, but we kind of discussed this at length last time. Does HR have anything to add to? Okay, anything?
Nothing to add, just to state that it reads well. It really emphasizes on what is done, who has authority, who gives the authority, so it reads really well. So I am good with 412.
Mr. Bonsill, you're good?
I'm good.
Okay, so, policy 412 stays as is, and again, I will reiterate that I did, talk to the person who brought this forward, and I'm glad that we were able to look at that and know that there are some extenuating circumstances and chances for some of our teachers, and we understand both sides of the equation here about teachers staying, but also giving them the assurance that they do have that option to seek a transfer. All right, thank you. All right. And thank you, HR. All right, policy 510, admissions requirement. All right, Ms. Linetti, would you like to just take over and then we'll jump in?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I just typed this a minute or two ago, so I don't have it electronically, so there is some. We had looked at State Code 22.14-2, which is designation of race and ethnicity. The question, and this question's come up numerous times with the administration. Why do we have what the statute said is you cannot be required to designate a student's race or ethnicity unless you give them the option of saying other. And there's a caveat to that which says unless a state law federal law requires you to do that. The question has come up numerous times with the administration, and I've been involved in some of these discussions in the past, is that we are required to turn it into the Virginia Department of Education, and they don't give us the option of doing other, which is why we don't designate other on our form or student admission form that we have. I know this keeps coming up, we have certain people interested in that. So what we were looking at was 510. When I look at this admission, while it seems it's an admissions question, to me it's really more of a records question. So what I just handed up to you is I took policy, and I swear to you, I just did this about 5 minutes ago, which is why I don't have it in the package. Policy 531, which is scholastic records, and my suggestion is if you want to add this to the section, that we add a section, I believe it's L, so it's a fairly long policy. So currently it ends at K. We'd add a section L, which would be designation of race or ethnicity, and it would read as the statute reads, which is no student parent shall be required to disclose information related to the student's race or ethnicity unless one, the student or the student's parent is given an option to designate other for the student's race or ethnicity, or two, such disclosure is required by federal law. So while we can add that to the statute, I do believe our form as currently required by VDOE, is my understanding from Mr. Chairman's office, is that we don't have the option of putting other, but I can put that into this statute. I don't know where else we require you to put your race or ethnicity, because that seems to be where you enter it into the system. But if there's another place that that's required, then they would have to follow the statute.
Okay, so let me just reiterate, because we've got so many papers, I want to make sure
Yeah.
my colleagues that we're all on the same page. So in our packet, and what we discussed last week was policy 510. And I had brought up, 510 has A, B, and C, and it's the admissions requirements. And I had brought up that I would like to add a D, which is straight from Virginia Code, as Cammie said, that reads, no student or his parent shall be required to disclose information related to the student's race or ethnicity unless the student or his parent is given an option of other. So, but Cammie is now telling us that she thinks it fits better, this part of the Virginia Code, rather than putting it in policy 510, to put it in the records policy of 531 that she just handed us in this little, yeah. So you're just saying it fits better with records instead of.
Yeah, I think
admissions
we
to
were looking at
school.
admissions because normally the first thing you fill out is that form that has that on there, but it could be other places as. It's really a records question tied to the student's identification information. So it seemed to me records might be a better place to put it. And this is our main policy on records for students.
Okay, all right. Are there any questions about that? I appreciate you doing that, Ms. Linetti. Because this does come up quite often, and I think that if something's in Virginia code, we've got to, you can't argue against the Virginia code, so I would like to see it. I would definitely like to see it in the policy 531 if you think that's where it best fits.
I think that makes more sense because it's really tied to the student's individual record as opposed to whether we admit you to the school division or not. I do think there might be an explanation. The fact that it's in here doesn't mean that we will automatically change our form, because if our form is required by VDOE to fill it out, then we have to follow what VDOE requires us to fill out. And that is an exception under this language. And so that's where it can be in there, just understand it may not automatically result in the registration form being changed.
And clear, help me understand why we can't change that, because to me, this D says if it's federally mandated, of course we have to do it.
Such disclosure is required by federal law. So if the Virginia Department of Education is required by the U.S. Department
Right.
of Education to send it in certain categories, and we're required to fill out what VDOE requires us to do, which is what I've been told by Mr. Jamison before. And the most recent decision came when Dr. Saltner was chief of staff. He wrote something back about 2 years ago. I just couldn't find that earlier today. So what I've been told is that because VDOE is required by federal law to turn in those are the categories that we have to do, because we have to follow what the Virginia Department of Education is telling us, and the Virginia Department of Education is following federal law. So that's why that exception applies on your registration form.
Okay, Excuse me. Okay, do we have any questions or concerns? Do we agree with adding this?
You might have to then add this to your agenda because it reads as 510, but when I
Right.
looked at it, it seemed to make more sense. 531 is a more appropriate place to put it, so you might have to add that later on in agenda or substitute this one in.
Okay. So, well, first, let's ask if we have any questions, and then I will ask you how to do that to get this done today, because this has been on for quite a while. So, Ms. Felton, do you have any questions about, this Part B, if you want to add it, or where it should go?
And that is the thing. The only question I just wanted to be made clear to the parents or what the policy is, that it don't get embedded, that it get lost, that we know where it is. And I know you have this policy 531, but if it keeps coming up, I guess we just, and it is a state, and I'm just formulating in my brain, and it is a state requirement. It should be acknowledged somewhere, and I do like that it's, you pull it up and we see it here. I'm good with it, the way that you have it moved, so are we gonna make it a, like you said, legal reference, are you gonna put in a legal reference, or you gonna make a letter of its own?
You have it on what I just handed up to you, which if you're looking on, watching on camera, you don't have a copy of this. I would take policy 531 at section L, which reads just pretty much as the state code reads, and then there's a legal reference that puts 22.14 dash, 4 dash point 2. What is it?
Okay.
As a legal reference there. So it's sort of a long policy. We would have to substitute this in. For those in the room, there's a hard copy of it to see. We will have to add that to the policy. But I think it makes more sense because it's usually designated in the students' records.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that it be referenced in 510. I'm good with,
Yeah, I don't think we'll do 510. I think 531's the better policy to put it in. Because if I was looking to see how do my student, 510 is admission. We're not gonna not admit you to school because you did or didn't put a race or designation on it. That's why I thought that maybe that doesn't make sense right there. But where you put it is in your records, and I'm trying to think of another example. There might be like a test or a survey or something you took where you might be asked what your race or resume. That'd be part of your records. Wouldn't be admissions. So I was afraid admissions was like a sort of a one-time event, and that might not be the best place if I was looking for. Like, let's say I was asked to take a survey on that. I wouldn't think to go look at a policy on admissions. I would want to see where do my records indicate my race or designation. So in my mind, when I was thinking about it a little while ago, the records policy is a better place to put it than the admission policy.
Okay.
okay.
Mr. Bowensteel? All right, so Ms. Linetti, since we did not have policy 531 on our agenda, but we do want to add that part of the Virginia Code.
My suggestion is that you ask to substitute policy 531 as amended to add the reference to the code section 22.14.2 and just take that up as a motion. Because we didn't actually have a recommendation on 510 in the packet.
Right, okay, okay. All right, so we can just do that. Right now, is there a motion to add this part of the code to policy 531 as K? Did you
It'll be
say
a new section L.
new section L?
Okay. So move.
Okay, moved by Ms. Felton. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bowensteel. So we will add this to policy 531 as section L, and it will be referenced. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we will add that to 531. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Linetti. All right, right, so next, let me give my colleagues, give me a few seconds, because we just got some new information. Laura Beth, for this next one, for the, student-led assemblies and demonstrations, can you tell us what you just handed us? And
Yes, ma'am, I can. So I looked at the divisions around us, so Chesapeake, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Suffolk, Newport News, and on the back of that chart is Hampton. And I made a chart for you that just kind of references their policy with it, their supervision requirements, what their instructional disruption clause is, the walkout discipline language, if outside groups or third parties are involved, and then just kind of a summary chart. So those are the ones around us that I pulled it from, and just kind of did a quick chart for you on that of how they handle the student-led assemblies. And then I also pulled for you Prince George County from Maryland, their actual policy number, because I thought this one had some good information in it as well, just in case you wanted to use anything of theirs to add to or change our policy in any sort of way. So those were the two sheets that you were given that go along with 540.
Okay, so Ms. Felton, Mr. Bonesteel, she also handed us, because it wasn't in the packet, policy 540. So that's, and it looks like this, it's,
Yeah, I got that.
okay, so that's 540, and Ms. Linetti, this regulation, 540.1, goes with policy 540, obviously, okay. So we've got here, demonstrations, and this is as written, and there was no redlining just because you were waiting for us to discuss this and look at the other options, is that correct, or? Right, yeah, okay. So I'm looking at the actual, well, I know we don't really talk about regulations, but I've got some heartburn over this regulation. So, because I don't know what disruptive demonstrations are, or protest, are they disruptive, or is it just simple protest? And I know last time, and I remember my colleague, Ms. Felton, bringing this up too, and I think I did as well, is we kind of wanted to see, like, with these demonstrations or protests, well, here it says they're not appropriate, but we want to make sure that we follow Virginia code. So is there in Virginia code, like, do we have to provide, like, I've heard that we have to provide a safe meeting place. Is that true, or is that?
Sorry, that's not a code section thing. When we started noticing a number of years ago that we were having some students walk out, and if you notice, this is a really old policy and regulation. This is 1993, so this was original to when we were adopting some of the standard policy we have. But a number of years ago, we had a couple situations where we had students walking out of class, and we were concerned just from a liability situation because of some of the topics that there might be a danger to them if we allowed them to walk out in the streets or other areas. So we started having a policy internally of controlling where they walked to, so that we knew that they were safe and that we didn't have outside groups trying to involve themselves where the students could get injured. So that was an internal policy for liability reasons we came up with. I'm trying to think right now, 40. So it's not required it's not a law required, it's just recommendations on how to best handle some of these situations.
Well, and this is kind of what we talked about last time, and I'll let my colleagues pipe in, but like definition, like it says here, sometime, and this is the policy, sometime both within and without regular school hours shall be made available for student assemblies to deal with relevant ideas. So that is talking about assemblies like you would have like a 10th grade assembly. That's not talking about a demonstration or a protest. Is that correct?
and honestly, I don't know that we have anybody here from Dossel to speak to this, but, I think the intent is those are school sponsored, the school has agreed, let's say we're talking about gun rights or something, we wanted to get, the kids want together and they've authorized doing that. As opposed to a bunch of students like, let's spontaneously protest because we want pizza at lunch. I think, and again, I don't know this really needs to be a docile question for you, is the intent was you went to them, you thought this was an important issue to talk about, and your principal agreed, and you were all going to set up a time to do that. That's what I'm assuming that's about. And again, this is why I'm not sure I can be overly helpful with you as not being a secondary principal to understand how this comes up or how they would do this.
Yeah, because I think last time, and it was kind of all three of us, kind of said we wanted it to come back in two different policies. And right now I'm looking at policy 540, and it still seems like we're mixing assemblies with spontaneous assemblies. And I see a big difference. I see a school-wide assembly that the principal has decided ninth graders need to attend at 1:00 versus a spontaneous assembly, where students just decide to assemble. But it's all in the same policy. And the regulation, again, I don't know the definition of a disruptive demonstration. Is a protest, can it be peaceful protest, can it be disruptive protest? Yeah, I will just, Ms. Felton, take it away. Because you and I had the same concerns last time, and I don't really see that
I,
has done
I
anything.
would like to say thank you, for getting us, Laura Beth, for getting this information. Now, when I look at our policy regulation, 5-40.1, it is not as explicit or drawn out like, Prince George County Public Schools. I like what they've done, but I also know that when you do, if we have to, I do know that when you do something outside of school, you're doing a walk or a parade or whatever, you have to get citation from the city as well, right? Yes.
Depends on the size. Over 200 people, you usually have to get, there are rules and the permission you have to get.
Okay, we're gonna assume that it's 200 plus, draw student. So what I like is how they did draw this out, the distinctions of it, and how they even gave it the definitions of like civil discourse, disruption, hate speech, libel. But that E is, I guess that's one of their own personal ones, right, Laura Beth? Okay, where they would meet or whatever. Can we? Is it possible? I would like us to use this as a model, to pull from that and modify it for our division as well. It is very detailed. And I say that because they go into F on the definitions where it says, spontaneous demonstration, a demonstration that did not provide previous notice to the school administration. Those type of things. I like how they, stress that. And it's still keeping chaos in an orderly manner. That's what I'm looking at. Just keeping chaos orderly. It might happen, but if we could, if my colleagues agree, I like some of the language that Prince George County has placed into their student demonstration policy. I would like to adapt some of that to make it modified to our division. No divisions are the same. We are very different ways.
Yeah, I agree. I like a lot of this. And I really like, especially that it has to be student-led, student-organized, because I know both Ms. Felton and I had brought up, who can attend these? Can a public official attend these? Can parent, And so I think that I like a lot of this. Again, we're just now getting it, but I think it's a great idea to use this as a model as well. It's very detailed.
And
Mr.
look-
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Laura, if you look at L,
Yeah, I circled that, yeah.
in accordance with the annotated Code of Maryland Education Article Section 26-101, a person may not cause it. I like how that's reading. I want to read to the point where the students understand it, and any outsiders, they see this, they understand where we stand, and how we do, affirm, your right to civil discourse. I like this. Thank you so much. Good job.
Mr. Bowensteel, do you have any comments?
Yes, on D1 where it says no third-party group should enter the grounds, I'm just trying to get clarification on what exactly would a third-party group be? That just be an individual?
Well, they've defined it as, they have it in their definition, their third party is an organization or entity unaffiliated with the public schools. Yeah, so it could be anybody that's not affiliated.
Right.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see. All right.
Right. For instance, someone's coming from off of the street and because they heard of it and they want to be a part of it. That would be a third party. I mean,
Mhm.
that's total out of place chaos. That would be disruption.
So just for clarification, you want me to use this as kind of our backbone for just student demonstrations and then have a separate one for assemblies?
Yes.
Okay,
I-
so kind
I
of
like
keep
that.
the one that we have maybe for assemblies, kind of rewrite that one. But use this specific one from Prince George for demonstrations.
I like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you like that? Okay, and then, yeah, and then the policy 540 is, yeah, the assemblies, so if you could kind of streamline that, so it's just talking about assemblies. Do we need to vote on that if we're giving her direction, Ms. Linetti?
I think you just tell her to come back next
Okay,
meeting with
okay.
it.
And then, use this to come back with another policy as well. Thank you,
Thank you.
LV. All right, so that leads us to D. The policies 751, 380, 752. And they're, under kind of community relations. And Cammie, do you want to explain those real quick and while they're here, and then I'll
I think we looked at this last time. 751 is use of school board equipment, 380 is school vehicles, and 372, 352, 752, sorry. That's the right one. 752 is use of school buses, so the different one. These are what we can control the, I'm gonna call equipment as opposed to facility type of use of our property.
Okay, and just for some background, this was brought to us because of some concern that individuals or groups are using some of our vehicles to travel to conferences. And so we, we weren't sure if that's a good thing, you know, for our cars to be used by individual groups or
Misused.
used. So, I know you've just given us the
I
regulation.
know when we talked last time, we weren't clear that you were talking about vehicles. So 751 is use of school board equipment. Generally, when I've seen this done, and I'm not aware of a whole lot of it, you know, there was a certain type of lawn equipment, particular kind of equipment the city needed to borrow it because, or the sheriff's department needed, and we, rather than them go rent one, we had it, we would have an agreement with them to use that. I think that's what this one was intended for. I think your concern is the, vehicles, which is 380, doesn't have a lot of detail on it. So I'm not really clear when we authorize other groups to use it, what they're going, who they're going through to get that, and also I don't know that I can answer those questions.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at this regulation to see what is the process. And if an organization wants to use our cars to go to a conference, what is?
I know,
what is
I know the
process?
rules on school buses, they're very specific, they're very limited amount of groups that can use our school buses. Partially because they're also designated, they're yellow, they've got, you know, pretty obvious vehicles. So there's a very strict limit on what we can use school buses for. But 380, I think, would be other vehicles, and I'll be honest, I can't answer the questions as to when we authorize folks to use them for school purposes. I know if I wanted to borrow a car, what I would go through, I need to go to the COSA conference, the VSBA annual conference, and I could put in a request to use a car to go to Williamsburg. I know that process in there, but I don't know what other groups. I can't answer the question as to what other groups do.
Okay, what is that process? And like, why would we let you borrow a car to go to a conference in
It would have to
Williamsburg?
be within my official dues, rather than them having to reimburse me for the time
Okay.
and money to go. I could use a school board vehicle because it's within my duties to go to a professional development so that they don't have to reimburse me for it, that I would use one of their vehicles, and it's actually the preferred way to do it, and to go to Williamsburg and back in one of their vehicles, and then that prevents me from then sticking in for reimbursement for my own vehicle. I'll be honest, I don't know what other groups are allowed to use the vehicles and what their procedures are, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Freeman, could you come up, because I know this was brought up because one of the board members had said that the VBEA had used vehicles to go to conferences. I don't know if that's true or false, but they just thought that it was concerned is, are we letting other groups go to conferences that really isn't our business, and I don't even know what business it was, and are we doing that, and if so, why?
Yes, ma'am, thank you for that. So, full disclosure, I'm seeing this now and I'm absorbing it, so I don't have
Right.
background, but I can tell you what we have. So I'm looking, it sounds like there's two different policies that we're talking about, so I'm gonna focus on the one that's, policy 3-80, and that's school board-owned vehicles, and this is business and non-instructional operations. And that's where it's, talking about the use of the school board vehicles. So, for example, if, we have employees that are going to a conference, we have a pool of vehicles that they can sign up for, take those vehicles, and it's a efficient way, the comments that Ms. Linetti was making about expenditures, of they just take that vehicle, van, drive the van to the conference, participate in the conference, come back, and there's no additional expense. The alternatives are they rent a car, that then is an expense to the division, and if we already have vehicles that are available to be checked out in that pool, that's an additional expense that we otherwise wouldn't need to take. I am unfamiliar with VBEA, so a non-employee taking something to what would not be what I'll call a school-connected, a Virginia Beach City Public School-connected environment. My understanding, and I would have to do more research, is if that in fact did occur, we could go deep dive and see what happened and see if we have a break in the process related to that. Because the intention is these are school board employees who are
Okay.
qualified and have met all of the criteria to use that vehicle for a school purpose, school board purpose.
Okay, and it does say here in the regulation, shall be used only for official business and only by persons authorized by the superintendent or designee. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I think this was brought, because of the concern of, is the process broken? You know, and are we allowing some groups to use the cars and others not? So, and again, I don't know if it's true or false. It's just-
If there's any information of a potential use where it wasn't school board employees who were approved to use something for a school board function, more than happy to look into that. We have looked into situations in the past and seen rentals that were not in line with what was expectations, and we handled that properly and got those corrected. We do have a good process in place for how to check them out, what vehicles are available, when they're not available, to then use a rental vehicle with all of the appropriate things that go on. So you could even think sports. So there are situations where we have smaller groups that will check out a van and use a
Right,
van to
right,
be able to
right.
go travel to a sporting event with their students. We also encourage them to use the white activity buses that we
Activity,
have
yeah.
available, or we have regular school buses that are available in a lot of cases that can be used as well. So we, based on everything that you're describing, if something happened other than that, we would want to know about that so that we could explore it.
Okay. Yes, okay, Ms. Felton?
So, Mr. Freeman, while you're standing there, The VBEA, from my understanding, in the structure of the VBEA, there are members like teachers, custodians, cafeteria workers. They are members of the VBEA. So if the members that are from VBEA choose to go to the VSBA, that acronym's right, Virginia School Board Association in Williamsburg, they are considered as employees. And they are going to a school certified function. So I guess my request is, since this is sort of a little bit confusing for the person that asked and allegedly said that VBEA, the organization,
Yeah.
use our vehicle, it could be possible that if my colleagues agree, and Ms. Linetti, who are the requesters? If we're going to be equitable to all of our employees, should we, in our uses of vehicles, more or less, we're talking about the vehicles, and the vehicles break down that, Trina Linetti, who's going to
What-
use them?
You'd also want to know if you were in an event, so if we're authorizing people to go to a conference, they're working for us. So if they get hurt along the line, you've got workers' compensation. If they damage the vehicle, it would follow us. But if it was a group that wasn't associated with it, they just happen to also be our employees, but they have another affiliation and they took that to an event that we didn't authorize them to be at, then the question is, it's liability. Is it workers' compensation if you get injured on there? If you damage our vehicle, we would want all those things in place to know that. So that's why you would have, and I'm not, honestly, I just don't know if we've rented out to other groups, but in that case, you're not doing official business. We would have to have, same as we have rental facilities, if we're allowing that, we have to have a certificate of insurance. We have to make sure we know what's going. We've got to be very clear the purpose for what you're taking the vehicle for, because also your status needs to be clarified for us. You might be an employee from us, but let's say you went up to the General Assembly because you wanted to watch something at the General Assembly. Well, we didn't authorize you, took a day off on your own. It needs to be very clear that while you're driving that vehicle, we're not responsible for what you're doing up there. If you get injured on there, then it's your organization's responsibility to pay us for the damage for the vehicle. And that it's not a workers' compensation situation, because we didn't send you up there in your workers' compensation. You might have been in a VPCPS vehicle, it's probably got our tag on it somewhere. But so we don't want people mistaking that you hurt somebody else and they go to sue us. We don't want them suing the Virginia Beach City Public Schools because we didn't authorize you to be there. All those things have to be worked out, which is why working with outside groups is particular. And just like it's clear in a rental facility, before we would allow an outside group to come in for rental, Mr. LePac's office would have gone through, they would have got a certificate of insurance, they would have made sure to verify what the rules are, those kind of things. So I think you just need, Mr. Freeman's folks need to verify whether this is happening, what are our procedures for doing that. I don't know what the rules are when you authorize a group to go to something that's not related to their job.
Okay, and maybe I should make that more clear, Mr. Freeman.
Yeah.
I mean, I belong to the VBA, which I can't, I'm not a teacher. I belong to the VBA, but I want to take this vehicle. I am your employee. I want to go to this conference. But because I am a VBA member, it doesn't mean that we all tagged in a car as the group that's sponsoring it. You're sponsoring your employees of Virginia City Public Schools, correct?
So I'm not going to say correct or not to what
I mean,
you're
I'm just
describing,
saying.
but what we can do, because we already have a process in place, and sometimes you figure out that the process is pretty solid except for like a nuance to it. So an employee who's going to travel to a conference, they probably have submitted for professional leave. They are subject to reimbursement of some sort for things, so there's a paperwork process that goes with that. So if they're going to something where they're functioning as an employee, they've been approved that professional leave, they're going to be approved for compensation, that's probably lining up to, it's an appropriate use for the vehicle. If they're not getting those things and it's a personal, they're going on the personal and it's no association with work, that's probably one where that's not an appropriate use. Now, with any process, does the person who's requesting and authorize have enough information available to know that, hey, that's not what you're
Yeah,
requesting
yeah.
is not appropriate.
Right.
That's a good thing that we can go back and clarify and be able to understand what our process is, because again, I'm hearing about this, so I know high level what the
Right.
process is. I don't know the details of it. I know the individuals that are involved. To make sure that we have our processes right so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where conditions like, hey, this is a school board who's been, a school employee who's been approved by their supervisor to go do something, they're eligible for compensation, we're saving money because we're not renting a vehicle, that's why they're using it, as opposed to, hey, it's education related, but I'm doing it on my own time, that would not be an appropriate use of a school board vehicle in that case, and we can refine our processes to ensure that that does not happen in the future if it has happened in the past.
Yeah,
One last statement, and wasn't trying to pull you in tight with that when I said correct. That was just affirmation when I come back speaking with myself. But what are the criteria, and I'm going on another real here, what are the criteria for professional development for our teachers or employees when traveling outside of is there a process for that as well, professional development,
Yeah, that's all in the business services manual and
Okay.
approval. Like, if one of my employees wanted to do something, they have to fill out a form for me. I have to verify it's part of the stuff. We have to verify the payment for it and what they're authorized to do. And then the business services manual has rules on the type of things you will pay for and what you can't pay for, how much you can pay for that. So that's all, there's forms that would be filled out for that, and you would have to follow that. How much we'll pay for a hotel, how much we'll pay for travel type of situations, and all that has to be pre-approved in a budget ahead of time. So that's mostly what you're looking for, is probably in the business services manual.
So I think what I'm trying to get to, all this is important, just to make sure that even if our teachers, custodians, cafeteria workers belong to the organization, but they're longing for professional development, that won't hang over their head because you belong to the organization. You won't be, you're held at a different standard. I guess that's where I'm trying to go with this. But I would like to see, and I'll go back to my first, I would like to see with the vehicles, who are the requesters? Can we break that out a little bit more? Because if that is a concern of one of our colleagues or even constituents, we need to make sure that they understand that we know who our requesters are and how we're handling it and what they're using it for, if I'm making myself clear.
I think what you asked for is, can we come back and tell you what the exact process is for how somebody requests a vehicle?
Yes, yes.
We can absolutely do that.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I appreciate you doing that for me.
Mr. Bonesiel?
Yeah, to me, it seems like, I mean, an organization, it doesn't really matter what it's going to say, any organization. If someone, just because they're employed by our school system, so to speak, and they're acting under that organization, to me, that's a different thing. If they're a member of ours, they should be coming and trying to get the vehicle, it seems to me. Because I could start an organization and then go get some people and say, hey, you know, we're going to the assembly, but they're not acting under the school board or the school admin. You see what I'm saying? When they're involved with an organization, that's kind of who that's just what I'm kind of seeing.
I think what you're saying is if they're involved in an organization that may be education related, but it's not specifically approved by their supervisor, they're doing it on their own personal,
Yeah.
then that would not be a criteria to request and receive a
Right.
school board
Yeah.
vehicle for that travel. But if they were doing that professional development, whatever training that was approved by their supervisor in accordance with all of the processes that Ms. Linetti was trying to describe, that would be a suitable. That's the intention.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
the
just confirming
intention,
that
exactly.
that our processes are rock solid to ensure that there aren't those, there isn't a possibility of the non-intended use to happen.
And Ms. Lena, you brought up a great example. I mean, just going to Richmond for the General Assembly during session. I mean, you could have teachers, custodians, cafeterias go in there. It's educationally related because they're talking about education, you know, but we don't know what they are. I mean, I don't know what someone's, you know, lobbying for in Richmond if it hasn't been approved, like you said. I mean, that was a good, no, that was a perfect example. And like you said,
That's
Mr.
a-
Bowenstiel.
Mr. Freeman's indicated there are processes in place. If it's happened, my guess is somebody was not clear on the
Yeah.
form, what their purpose was, and it wasn't clear because I know with my own employees what I have to sign off for them to do and don't do, and I would have had to know, they would have had to turn in everything to me before I even approved them applying to get the stuff. So if there's a situation where somebody may have done that, it might be an individual situation. I will say there are times when perhaps a principal or superintendent thought it was related and authorized,
Right.
which they can do, but they
Yeah.
have to write that down. But that shouldn't normally be it, because we have to protect the resources we have.
Yeah.
And for a lot of reasons, I don't want somebody up on an event, if they're not following our rules, I don't want them going out to party where they're drinking, maybe had wine with dinner or something. We wouldn't allow that under our procedures, and they're driving our vehicle back.
Right.
Those kind of things, that's why we're pretty careful about who uses our equipment and our vehicles. So my guess is if there was a situation, perhaps it wasn't really clear, because our own processes, just from what I deal with, would pretty much eliminate an outside group from being able to do that. So somebody probably wasn't very clear in the form if it happened.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's all about, liability, like you said. Okay, so Mr. Freeman, would you please, at the next meeting, if this is okay with my colleagues, to bring back exactly the process and you do some investigation, and maybe could you bring, or let us see a form? I would like to just kind of see the form that you have to fill out to do this,
Yes, ma'am.
to get a
Absolutely.
vehicle. Okay, any other requests by Mr. Freeman? All right, so we're just gonna bring, specifically, I think we're just kind of interested in the 380. So we'll just bring the 380, the school board owned vehicles back, and we'll get information from you next time.
If you allow me, Ms. Green, professional development criteria as well, could we see some of that language or criteria as professional development, how it's done?
We will loop in the right experts to be able to go through that process with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
But not you. Probably not Mr. Freeman's department, although there's
Right.
people to get professional
Okay.
development.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Ms. Linetti, policy 323.
We actually looked at this policy last month, but it came through, I think the Department of Business Services asked that, we change the amount on here, which, so I think it's in section B. Superintendent or designee is authorized by the school board to sell or exchange personal property not exceeding 5,000. I think they want to move it to 10,000,
Yeah.
if I'm correct. Laura Betsy, are you looking at that? They didn't cross out 5,000. They want 5,000 or 10,000? Yeah, it still looks like, so I'm sorry, I'm looking right here. They probably need to have this reading 10. Oh. All right. The written word needs reading 10,000.
Listen,
If I'm correct, I think Mr. Hopkins brought down to me 5,000 is a relatively small amount compared to what things actually cost, and so they wanted to move it just that amount up to $10,000 instead of $5,000. So I would, it says $10,000 in the numerical one, it's just correcting the word to say, instead of 5 to say 10. That was the only recommended change.
Okay, do we have any concerns or problems with that? Okay, so, do I have a motion to send policy 323 as amended with the $10,000 limit onto the school board for a vote, for information?
If I could just interject,
Sure.
I should have asked. So, Ms. Linetti, the individual that said to take it up to 10,000, what was the reason for the carry it to 10,000? Sure, take your time,
Sorry.
take your time.
My understanding is that the value of properties, what would have considered, before they would have considered 5,000 to be a small property, now they're considering 10,000, just value of things have gone up. And so they thought, otherwise they would have to go to you before that
basically that it was just small, and with the amount that it has gone up, they wanted to raise that so that way they could come to you at 10,000 instead of the 5,000, because it'd be coming to you a lot more often.
Think, and sometimes, I understand, but sometimes they need to be heard by the public and, by the constituents that are listening in. Thank you so much.
All right, so do I have a motion for 323 to be taken for information to the next school board?
So move.
Moved by Ms. Felton, seconded by Mr. Bowenstiel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so policy 323 moves to the school board for info. Okay, and now we're gonna go to policy 759. LB, if you would, wanna take it over to give our, Ms. Linetti a little break, if you would like. It's community relations, policy 759, just kind of the purpose of this policy. There's no changes recommended. And this is just a 5-year, review for this, a standard 5-year review.
I can fill some. We looked at this in 2020 and updated a little bit by some of this, it's a statutory requirement. And so we went and looked into those type of organizations that we should be collaborating with. There's nothing exciting about this particular policy, it's just following the state law statute. And I'm sorry, we're not recommending any changes to
Right.
this.
So it's employment counseling, placement services for our secondary students, yeah. And the,
I will say in
community-
2020, we expanded a little bit to talk about military organizations because we felt that was relevant to our area and some of the career education programs on there and apprenticeships. So we extended that because that seems to be where our focus is.
Correct, yeah, that was very good. Mr. Bowenstiel, did you have something? No? All right, okay, do I have a motion to send policy 759 onto the school board for information?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Bowenstiel.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Felton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, policy 759 will move to the school board for information. All right, now the fun starts. Policy 340, that very short policy that we'll look at, right, Melissa? All right, policy 340, design, build, contract, procurement. Policy
I'm going to step in on this one. And I am not a content expert on this, but I have spent a lot of time the last month learning about this concept. The city pointed out to us, to some of the city folks, we were working on the CIP modernization committee, and that they're pointing out that the state law has a procedure, and there's actually two procedures, but it's called design build. Under procurement law, the default is normally design, bid, build, and that's where we normally do our processes. But over time, it's been realized that there are certain ways you can do things a little bit faster that can be efficient. The concept behind the Virginia Public Procurement Act is to protect the taxpayer dollars. So you want to do the best competitive processes you can, but there's certain exceptions. Last year, in 2024, the General Assembly allowed some changes to be implemented by local governments, and one of them had to do with design build. And they were saying you can use this process instead of design bid build, but you have to first adopt a policy on it. And the city sent us theirs, when we were talking through the CIP modernization committee. We were talking to somebody, said, like, we adopted this policy last year, you might want to consider adopting it as an option for you. So design, build, and construction management, they're similar but slightly different concepts on there. So what we wanted to do is to give you that option to use that the city's suggesting are good procedures in there. So one of the things you have to do is you have to make it consistent with the state rules on this. So ours is consistent on there. It's just written more in a policy. In fact, it is a very long policy to go through. I will tell you, I've had to spend a lot of time working, and I think Ms. Ingram and Alicia Smith are your procurement officer. and I and her staff, we're literally going 3 or 4 days a week trying to learn this policy. It does not mean that this will be where you automatically go when you're building your process. It is a choice for you to do that. And Ms. Ingram, if you want to come up in case I screw this up, because I'm probably going to screw this up in explaining this. I have talked with the chair about maybe we need to make this a little bit more clear to you that this is not a change. This is simply offering an option to you. But the opening paragraph would be the school board is committed to the efficient use of public funds and the use of various construction delivery methods, and that's the better term, construction delivery method, allowed by the Virginia Public Procurement Act. Therefore, the school board adopt, design, build, that's right, I need to see a mistake right there, design, build, and construction management project delivery methods for use in capital improvement projects. Design, build, and construction management are project delivery methods used when competitive sealed bidding is determined not practicable, not physically advantageous, and not efficient for a complex project or when accelerated project delivery time is needed. So, and I had a discussion with the chair earlier today about perhaps we need to explain this an option. It is not what you're going to, but you make a determination that one of these categories applies. Both project delivery methods are intended to minimize the project risk and to reduce the delivery schedule by overlapping the design phase and the construction phase of the project. So, maybe let's make it a little bit, yeah. Oops. Ooh, it's So first of all, it's not all projects. You have to have something that qualifies as a complex project, so you've got a definition there. Construction management and design build are spelled out. And Ms. Ingram, do you want to give an explanation of the difference between the two of them before I screw this up?
Yes, good afternoon. So this does not prohibit us from using the traditional procurement method, design, bid, build. It just gives other options to the school division. As Ms. Linetti was saying, in conversations with the city, that's something that recently they also have used as other procurement methods. To answer Ms. Linetti's question, design, build would allow the conversation to working with a design build team, which often has a contractor who's a design builder, and then an A&E or architectural engineering firm who is a design team. They work as one unit. So your contract is with the design builder team. The construction management method, you would already have entered, as you would with design, bid, build, a contract with an architectural engineering firm. You would have gotten to but a conceptual level, and then you would say, okay, you know what, we want to really, instead of just getting cost estimates from an architectural engineering firm, we want to get cost estimates from, similar to the design build team, from a construction management team. And so your contract would be, you would have a separate contract with the construction management team. However, you would enter in with that contract with them earlier in the process to help you with this in the same fashion, design build team on the other procurement method. Cost effectiveness, so let's say the design firm might say, you know, do this design X way, and a contractor might say, you know, it might be cheaper if we do it Y. So it just having different variables in the cost of construction and having the design build team or the construction management team in the process earlier. In our traditional process, design, bid, build, we basically have a contract with the architectural engineering firm. We finish design to 100% completion, of course, getting cost estimates along the way from professionals who will give us cost estimates. And then we put it out to bid. And we are, by procurement law, as Ms. Linetti said, the VPPA procurement law, we would be required to pick the lowest bid after that 100% design takes place. So again, the traditional method is you work to 100% with a architectural engineering firm, 100% design, you put it out to bid for a contractor, and you award that bid. These two other procurement methods, design, build, you are entering into a contract earlier with a design build team in the process to try to get more complete cost estimates. and more creative ways to do your both design and construction. And then on the alternate procurement method of construction management, you would have two separate contracts, one with the architectural engineering firm that would work for the school division, and then one for a construction management company that would again be early in the process and help you with cost estimation and design and construction methods to help be more efficient with the project.
Let's just pause there after the first paragraph and see if we have any questions. I know I've got several, but
It's complicated.
I'm
I
gonna
will-
yield to my colleagues. I've got several notes here. Mr. Bonesteel, do you have anything yet or no? Ms. Felton? Okay, so, I'm glad that you clarified that this, I mean, really, this is two more options. Now, does the construction management ever, is it ever tandem with the, design build? Or is it two?
No, they're
okay, so it's
two separate
completely
procurement
separate
methods.
things. So you wouldn't go with the design build and the other, it's either one or the other.
Correct.
Okay, and then in the first paragraph, 1, 2, 3, the fourth sentence, I would like to maybe see a change here because this is where I'm a little confused because it says, therefore, the school board adopts design, build, and construction management project delivery methods for use in capital improvement program projects. To me, that doesn't sound like it's opening up options to me because it says, we're doing this to use in our capital improvement. Could we say potential use or possible use
How
just right
about
there?
as options?
Yeah, yeah.
As,
Because right when I read that, I'm like, oh, so that means it's limiting PPEA, it's limiting, design, bid, build, because now we're gonna use this, if we adopt this policy, on our capital improvement programs. So I would like just that in there. So what is your advice for the best?
if you're looking second sentence. Therefore, the school board adopts design, build, or construction management project delivery methods as options for use in capital improvement projects.
Perfect, as options.
So if you go down to B, it's gonna talk about when you get approval to use this. So there's approval of the use of design, build, or construction management. And this one says the school board authorizes the superintendent or designee to use design, build, or construction management project delivery and contracting in accordance with this policy, applicable law, Virginia Department of General Services procedures for construction projects on a fixed price or a not to exceed price and school division procurement procedures, because there's a lot more that goes with this. So the first part, we actually talked about this and decided when would we go to the school board to do this. We did, after some decision, we thought $40 million was the difference between a big project and a small project. All the millions, we still thought that was a reasonable thought. So we said under one, CIP projects $40 million or less, superintendent or designee approves the use of design, build, or construction management. Then if it was gonna be over $40 million, then you would need to bring it to the school board. So you'd have to make that decision, but you're gonna have to authorize it. And then you'll see, the decision is not appealable. The number 4, written justification. So the approval of design build must be done in writing and include the following. You gotta explain why design build and construction management is more advantageous than a competitive sealed bid. Construction determination that competitive sealed bidding is not practical or not physically advantageous. Determine that there is a benefit to the school board by using design build or construction management, and the justification approval will be included with the RFP and retained by the school division file. So when you're gonna choose to do this, you're gonna go through all of those elements on it, and then if you watch your eyes, when you back up here. When you talk about when you're going to do it, we talked about in the first paragraph, when competitive sealed bidding is determined not practicable, is not physically advantageous, not efficient for complex projects, and we talked down here in the definition of complex projects, what type of projects this would be better suited for. So you're gonna go through all of this before you do it, and all that has to be written on there. And so let's say it's over $40 million, I'm gonna tell you like big in school, it's gonna be over $40 million. They would have written all this out and brought it to the school board, and you would have looked at that justification, say, based on what you're telling me, then we are going to approve you to do that. Under $40 million, the superintendent's going to approve that.
Okay, questions. Okay, so why do we even have a 40 million or less for the superintendent? Because if this is for school construction, no school is ever gonna be built under $40 million.
There are cases where, let's say you need to do like a prefab shed or something like that at a school. It would save you money to do design build, just work with a design builder team. And it would be very much cheaper to have them have an A&E to help you go through the permit process. And whatever applicable laws the school division needs to comply with the city for permitting for that shed. So that is the reason for the delta there. There are some very simple projects where design build would make sense. So however, anything large, the more complex it gets, there are sometimes advantages to go in design build, sometimes disadvantages. And I believe Ms. Linetti went over all the justifications, which are really good ways to explain that as you're getting that approval.
Okay, when is competitive sealed bidding determined not practical?
So as I mentioned, so competitive sealed building is the traditional, so that is by law, or that's our go-to, that's what you would normally do. Not practicable, basically, so in the case where you might already know the concept of design, so let's say you already have like a prototype school maybe, but you need to amend it to your site. You might say, you know what, it might be more practical to have the construction management team or the design build team in the process a little earlier to really get their opinions on the constructability and working alongside the architecture and engineer who need to, by law, be able to stamp and sign off on things. Another reason might be you might have concept plans and have already gone out for public community input. So you have a lot of information already. So you are far enough into the concept of the project that you would have something to offer to the design builder team or the construction management team. And again, it's getting the expertise of the contractor, either the design builder or the construction management, earlier in to help you with cost savings. And that's where this would benefit.
Okay.
Expediting's another area. We need to get this building up fast, or faster than a traditional way of doing it. So rather than us develop the whole plans, and I'm gonna do this in CAMI terms, not real engineering terms. We need to come up with a whole plan, hire an architect to do that. We might say it might be more efficient for us to get started on some of the process early and finish the rest of it. And then that sounds weird, but we know we need to start the site work, but we don't have the final on what the building's going to look like. You could use design build to get started with the process rather than you don't have to have every door, window, everything spelled out in place beforehand. We know we gotta start building a foundation, we know we need to prep the land. We could start with design build, doing it that way, and then work with the contractor, depending on the kind of construction management or design build folks, and start and finish the rest of that. Design build allows us to do that rather than us having to have almost all of it done ahead of time before we put out. And let's say, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure I'm saying this in very non-professional terms. We would have to go out and say, here's what we want, it's all done, now you bid on it for us. Whereas we can say, we're looking on working on this project, we don't have it all worked out, but we want to bring you on along, we want to qualify you as a contractor and bring you in with your ideas and start working with you and allow us to get started with the project. That's what design build allows us to do. Construction management, and correct if I'm saying this wrong, we hire somebody that's working directly for us who's going to then manage that project for us. Did I say that correctly? Is that the construction?
So it's very similar to the design build team where, so we will already, except you have two contracts that we would already have working for us, the architectural engineering firm. And there is value to that as well. But the construction management, that would be a contractor. It could be, the same contractor that you would do a design build. It's just a different way of procuring it. And they would work with the A&E team rather than work with them after you receive the low bid in the traditional method. They would work with them early on to help with efficient construction of the building.
Okay, and just, I guess just to overview before we go any further, my, problem with this policy, and again, I'm not the expert, but just as a school board member and then just as the regular public, I think it's very long and it's very hard to understand. So, and when our public, when people are reading policies, I would hope that they would be able to understand that without calling and having Cammie, our lawyer, to explain it, or you to explain it. So that's just one of the things that I would hope that we can get it maybe simplified, like you said earlier, and shorter. And then also, in some other cases, and we haven't gotten to it, I think in some cases, the school board is kind of left out. It's school division, designated superintendent, so I'll be addressing those as well. Those are just my overview, because I don't think we're gonna get through every page today, so I just wanted, to put that out there.
And like I said, we talked with the city about how they do that. You do run into some potential problems because we're required to comply with what the Virginia Department of General Services has and the state law. It designates who can be on some of these evaluation teams, the amount of people that can be on the evaluation teams. It doesn't leave us room to put 11 school board members on, something like that. We have built-in processes where the superintendent would appoint probably liaison for you. We also have the potential, because the Virginia Public Procurement Act has a section called the Ethics in Public Procurement. We can't have people have a potential conflict or on some of these committees. And there is that potential with elected officials that if you have received donations or have relationships with contractors or subcontractor people working on these that might be bidding on it, that could pose a problem for us. So we tried to limit those situations where we would have an individual school board member would be able. So we'll see within this policy when designated certain projects, like the shed that Mrs. Ingram was talking about. You probably don't need a school board member sitting on to do a shed. Building a school, you might want to have a liaison, one or two school board members as a liaison. We wouldn't want you as voting members in that. We would bring you would be able to go back to the board. There are stages built in, which isn't in this policy. You saw that in the presentation that the facilities office department brought you to school board meetings, where in the process we would come to the school board and show it to you, and you would approve stages of that. What you'll see in this particular policy is that on certain projects, you would designate up to 2 school board members as liaisons to the committee. That's what the city does.
Yeah.
And then you sit there and you're working along with them. The part about where we come to you on an individual project, that's not in here because this is an overall concept. On a project, you would decide for, let's say Princess Anne High School, because that's probably our next construction project. You would then, as a board, decide when are they going to bring things to you? When are you going to be involved in it? And that was the explanation that you saw, let's say 2 school board meetings ago, where you saw little arrows on there. They were showing you where in the process they would come to the school board. You still have the absolute ability to do that on a project. We just wouldn't put it into this policy because this is an overall policy that can apply to many different kinds of projects.
Okay. And then just a question on complex projects, Melissa. That seems like it kind of covers that everything will be complex, because there's so many reasons. I mean, I don't, you could, and difficult site location, I mean, you could pretty much say almost anything's difficult because either of traffic but unique equipment, specialized building systems, multifaceted program, accelerated schedule. Yeah, it just seems like that kind of covers everything. So it's a complex project, just pretty much going to be anything over $40 million, or?
And I would defer to Ms. Linetti because we decided that definition needs to be in there.
That's the state definition.
Okay,
It's a 2-part. It has to meet this category, but then it also you have to get that written justification why you're not going to use the traditional method. So then you have to talk about why it's not, why competitive steel building is not practical, why it's not physically advantageous, why it's not efficient. You still have to go through that process. It has to meet this definition, a complex, and then you go back to the written
Okay,
justification.
so that is the state,
Yeah.
that's the state definition, okay. Because, I mean, I read it and it's like, everything's complex, kind of. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any more questions on maybe this first page?
And since I know you're gonna be running out of time and your other policy is important too, from here on out, it divides it into the two categories.
Okay.
Design, they're similar, they will read very similar to you. And then this design build, one of the areas that's important in design build, is a progressive, design build, I can't remember what section that's in, a little bit further down, progressive builds in section 6. It allows you to accelerate how fast you might do a project for it. The city uses this, they were suggesting this might be a good technique for us in certain types of areas, so they've had a lot of success with using this part of it. But essentially what design, build, and construction management allow you to do, you go out first with an RFQ, you're gonna qualify the contractor, the design build, or the architect, you qualify them, you shortlist them, you get a group of them, and then you say to them, we've decided you meet the qualifications, and then we give you the RFP. This is what we're trying to do. You come back with your recommendations and allows us to work with them. So they read almost identical in that concept, how the committees are formed. You have to have all the language about how the committees are formed and what the procedures are on that. But those concepts, the first thing you do is qualify the individual, the companies, you shortlist the companies, and only those companies that meet the qualifications will then be offered the RFP. It gives you a certain amount of people, you're probably gonna go up no more than 5 companies. Then you start working with those companies and pick them from there. So if you read the two sections, and it's not worth going through right now, they'll read very similar in that sense. Progressive design build is under design build. It's an advantage to working certain type of projects. Construction management is just a different way of doing it, where you're actually hiring somebody working for you. I believe we decided Chesapeake has had a lot of success with this form of procurement, so we added that one in there. They read very, very similar, so if you're reading, once you've read through one, you can read the rest of it. So that's something you can look at later on. So the process, it's a 2-step process in there. All this has to be adopted and put out for you to even be able to use this in the first place. What the city did on one of the most recent projects, they adopted a resolution that had all of this in there for the project. We'd rather you have just a standard one, so you don't have to keep adopting it in there. So, if you wanna look at that, and come back next month and take a little bit more time to do that, allow you to do that, but they will read very similar. So if you're reading through it like, oh, I just read that, it will look like that to you because there's just minor differences with the process.
Okay, so Mr. Bowenstiel or Ms. Felton, do y'all have any questions on A, B, or C? It's the first 2 pages, basically.
Just as Ms. Linetti, you did say, just to verify, you did say that city council suggested that we use this model, which is their model that we are.
Yes, and we actually did a seminar. We brought a gentleman from HRSD came in, did a whole seminar for us because we weren't as familiar with it. HRSD uses this. It's not a new concept. There were some changes that were put into it. We've just never used it before, and the city mentioned this to me a couple months ago. And Melissa had been looking at the construction management program, ways to expedite it and do it. The reason it's so complicated is because although it's not the traditional competitive negotiation, they're trying to maintain as much of the competitive process, the fairness, so nobody's left out of it, so that everything's transparent. So that's why it's so spelled out the way it is, because it's not using the traditional process, but they're trying to build in as many of those concepts of negotiation, reasonableness, transparency into it. And so that's why it reads so complicated. It's not actually that different from other competitive processes, but to ensure that we are making sure we're being as fair as possible and the public knows what we're doing with their taxpayer dollars, that's why you adopt it like this.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier Chesapeake School going through the same thing, and I was going to ask what other division had a non-instructional operation like this, and just to compare it, that's comparable to us.
Maury High School was just bid, and that actually did it through a PPEA, and that's very synonymous with the way progressive design build works as well. So there are many other localities and school divisions that might end up, as I mentioned, this is probably not for every project, but once you have enough information, as I mentioned, like a prototype or conceptual designs, it might be more efficient, and as Ms. Linetti said, too, time saving as well, cost savings to enter into negotiations with the contractor as well, so that you get the best prices, most efficient way to construct, and then able to have those conversations early on in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bowenstiel? Mr. Bowenstiel, do you have any questions on the first couple of pages? All right,
Would you like to pass this over to next month? And
yeah, I mean,
then
there's,
It's
I
a
do
big
not-
policy.
Yeah, I do not feel comfortable putting my thumbs up on this right now. I've got too many marks and questions and stuff. But I did want to ask you a question on just, okay, so RFPs, does it, and I think we discussed this before, but does the school board see the RFP first?
We can certainly come up with any process needed, but an RFP, like you would put out an RFP for custodial supplies.
Right.
It's basically just
I mean
asking
a
for
bill.
proposals
Yeah,
and
I'm-
bids.
I mean, for a
Sure, absolutely.
complex project.
And we can certainly, as part of the process, make sure that that is seen. And again, there are some that are more complex and some that are not.
Because I know in 4D, the justification and approval will be included in the RFP and retained by the school division in the construction and procurement records for the project. I had a question mark, well, is this the time that, the school board needs to see this RFP also?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and state it a little bit more firmly. We follow the school board's guidance and intent, and it's very clear in all of the conversations we've had about major capital projects. And we're talking about, I mean, we're really talking about this because Prince Anne High School is on the
Right.
plate, and we've gone through this series of conversations with our staff in the city that we've reported to you on, and how do we do that best. We've heard loud and clear that, and it came, I think the chair mentioned at the last one, hey, will we be able to see the information on the RFP to make sure, again, for transparency, to make sure that we're aligned with what's being put out? Absolutely. We will.
And why would that not
Whatever
be-
is legally capable of us doing, we will do to make sure that the board is well-informed and ensure that we're following the school board's guidance and intent.
Okay, thank you, that's perfect. Now, why would that not be appropriate to add that?
We were just copying, trying to get something that was consistent with the Virginia General Services Department policy and the city's policy, and they don't have it, that's not written into theirs because they don't actually, neither General Services nor the city require that it go to the city council to approve the RFPs or the RFQs. RFQs is qualifications, the contract RFP is the actual proposal itself. They don't require that, so they don't have it in their policy. We were simply copying to be consistent with those two standard policies that were out there. So that is not required by state law. That would be something you would be requiring, so
Okay.
that's why it's not drafted in here.
Okay, but we could add that, okay. All right, okay, so, yeah, I think this is probably a good stopping point, because we do have a hard stop at 5:00 because of other appointments and meetings. So Ms. Felton and Mr. Bowenstiel, are you okay with obviously bringing this back next month? So we had tentatively that we would meet, November,
I would say 25. Is
yeah,
that right?
25th. So I definitely think that is a couple days before Thanksgiving, but we do have a school board meeting that day. What time is it? Does anybody know what time our school board meeting is that day? We haven't decided yet.
I'm not aware of anything, special hearings or anything that day,
Okay,
so
we
I
haven't-
assume normal time.
My colleagues, let's decide what time we can meet. What time did we have it tentatively scheduled for that day? 1:30?
1:30.
Do you think that we need to come? Can my colleagues make it at 1:00? Because we've got this and Ronnie, I'm so sorry that we've got a very important, policy, the, restraint and seclusion, 5-59(3) is the regulation and 5-54, the restraint and seclusion. So that's gonna be a big one too. Do you think, can my colleagues make a 1:00 meeting? Can you make a 1 o'clock meeting that day?
We will do whatever's described. If I may add one
Yeah.
thing when you're complete with this one, just for perspective.
Okay. Cammy and LB, 1 o'clock? Or, and that would be the 25th, the same day as our school board meeting.
Yes.
Tuesday, 1 o'clock, here. Okay, yes, Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, so, and just for a reminder, and you mentioned the brief that we had, I think it was 2 meetings ago, where we talked about here could be a potential process that we thought that the school board was aligning around, and it started with an RFQ, and then went to an RFP, and we provided timelines related to that. In order to put out the request for qualifications, this is what would cause the process to take a little bit longer, is if we don't have a policy that we can do the request for qualifications. So just for awareness, that's what's the significance related to the timing of it.
Okay. I'm sorry that we
Oh,
didn't get through with it, but it's just a lot.
I'm not saying anything related to this,
Yeah.
it's just to be transparent.
Yeah.
If the conversations come up, and anything staff can do to help
Okay.
support it, we know that there's the work that's gotta be done, and you guys gotta be able to do it. Just for awareness, that's the consequences as we kind of go down the road.
Okay, and what I would like to suggest to my colleagues on this committee, if you have any notes on your red line version, anything that you want added, would you get that to me as soon as possible? And then I would like to get it to one of you to discuss, so that next time we can, go through and move on. But it's just, like I said, a lot. And then next time we'll get to the restraint and seclusion as well. All right. Okay, so we don't have any other business, I don't think, Ms. Linetti, LB? All
No,
right.
and I will, on restraint and seclusion, the significant change for you is the policy, which isn't really, I mean, if you read it, it doesn't read the difference. We rewrote the regulation, what I consider a little bit easier to read, but it's not significantly different than last time, than what we've had in place. The policy is now what we're changing. We're saying we're not going to use restraint and seclusion unless you meet one of these categories. That's very firm in there. You are then required by Virginia Department of Education to have in place, if that happens, you have to follow these rules. We've always had that in place under a disruptive process. It's organized a little bit differently, but it's not significantly different. So although it looks like it's a lot of reading, if you know what we've had in place before, and we're going to take that out, since we've created our own policy and regulation for it, but it's not that different than what we've had before. The significant change for you is the policy, which says we will not use restraint and seclusion unless you meet these categories. And the rest of it has to be in there, because on the situations when you do have to use it, you have to have that policy in place. Again, so other than it being reorganized a little bit, is not significantly different than what we've always had in place.
Okay, and I think, Ronnie, when does SEAC meet again? Okay, January. So it would be nice to, my colleagues, really read and call for any questions, because we need to get this done, because I really want, because I know our SEAC friends are waiting for us to get this done, and they meet in January. But I think too, another, observation and reality is this is not a special education policy. This is just a policy, right? I mean, it's.
Which is why we've
Yeah.
always been disrupted. People make that mistake
Right.
on there. It's not, what you see is special ed tends to be better at documenting and handling these
Right.
situations. So they tend to have better records for it, but it could be a fight in the hallway. can
Right, so we
resolve this.
need to remember that this is for all of our students, and, because when you say that, people just assume it's only for the student, and it's really for the safety and for all students, okay? I just wanted to put that out there. All right, so our next meeting will be November 25th at 1 o'clock. We're gonna just give us a little bit more time. Okay, is that good? All right, well, I adjourn this meeting at 5 o'clock. Thank you for coming.